group.
We certainly are. So all of that has been revealed to the world. Our technical prowess is now known to everybody, Johnny.
Lovely, we're in, and there's people online. All right, but if you're now, people can join via Zoom as well. Carry on.
Okay, slight technical hitch, but hey, the show must go on. So thank you so much for that. And tonight I'm really, really happy and excited to be welcoming Natasha Gordon to our virtual Wananga. Natasha is the head of marketing, currently the head of marketing at World of Wearable Arts, which is no small job in itself, but particularly in times of COVID has probably been, as with a lot of people working in the sector, an extremely frustrating and an emotional roller coaster of a job over the last few years. And prior to that, Natasha actually was working for the Auckland Theatre Company, and prior to that was working in some very illustrious places in the UK and overseas. And she describes herself as a storyteller with a passion for arts and entertainment, having worked in television, performing arts as a producer, director and marketer. And in both industries, the key driver she feels is about crafting the story. So that's fantastic in terms of what we're trying to do here, because we do really understand and know that we need to reveal the arts and the artists as our storytellers and how important that is. So thank you so much for taking the time out to be with us today in the school holidays, and welcome, Natasha.
Kia ora, Ali. Kia ora koutou katoa, ko Natasha toku ingoa, no tāmaki makaurau ahau, ko whakatū toku kāinga anaia kei te koa ahau ki te mihi ki a koutou, no reira tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou. Hello everyone, my name is Natasha. I come from Auckland originally, but now I live in Nelson since April of last year. Thank you very much, Ali and Johnny, for the opportunity to speak today, and thank you very much for everyone who's listening in and taking the time. This is a really exciting project, so yeah, I'm really excited to be part of that. So my background, as Ali has said, is I'm currently head of marketing at WOW, and prior to that I worked for Auckland Theatre Company. My background throughout my working career has always been in the arts. I first of all started in theatre as an actor, producer, writer, director, and then moved on to television over in the UK as a sort of researcher, producer and director, and then again more recently, of course, is arts experience and marketing. So my passion is really connecting artists and audiences, and how that can really impact on communities as well. So I thought that might be an interesting topic for today. So I'm going to, so you don't have to stare at me the whole time, I'm going to share some slides to illustrate the journey. So let's hope this goes without a technical hitch. Hopefully you can all see that. Great. So from what I've experienced and what I've also read about is if a city or region can develop and support a vibrant creative ecosystem, then not only will its artists flourish, but so will audiences, businesses and local economy. And in order to create that vibrant ecosystem, you need to have a diverse mix of art forms as well as multiple layers of offerings, just to ensure there's something that will appeal to everyone. So you're including as many people as you possibly can from your community. And the more you have on offer, the more often people come out to take part and make it a regular part of their lives. So when I'm talking about offering multiple layers of offerings, I don't just mean having a theatre, an art gallery, a cinema, a street installation and a museum. I also mean having multiple layers within each art form. So for example, with theatre, ideally you have a number of theatre companies in your community who offer sort of service different audiences, if you like, and offer different styles of performance. It's really hard for one company to be all things to all people. So you need both amateur and professional, contemporary and classic, cutting edge, traditional, you know, just a combination of everything. And these different layers are what create that self-sustaining ecosystem. And because performing arts are what I have the most experience in, and I know Auckland's theatre scene best, I thought I'd just talk to that as an example to demonstrate how those creative layers form those ecosystems and how they become self-sustaining and supporting instead of competition, if you like. So I'll start with basement theatre. Many of you watching, I'm sure, are familiar with basement theatre in Auckland. It's a nurturing ground for young and experimental theatre. Numerous shows kick off here, and they offer a number of grants and support packages to help nurture you and your project to fruition. It's a tiny, intimate theatre. I love the basement. And it's got very basic seating, but it's a super exciting place to be. It's got pretty cheap tickets, and it's got a really vibrant bar atmosphere out the front. So, you know, if you go to the basement, that you get a mixed bag of theatre with sort of a mixed range of production values, some amazing and some pretty average. And it's a testing ground and also an entry point for artists. Moving on to Silo, if you're familiar with them, it's sort of a little bit like Basement's big sister. It offers really exciting contemporary theatre with pretty high calibre actors. Their tickets are a little bit more expensive, and the theatre is presented in a sort of edgy contemporary theatre, and way more edgy than you would say experience with contemporary theatre at Auckland Theatre Company. So Silo don't have their own venues, so they often present at Q Theatre or Basement or other venues around the city. And if you like to be challenged, enjoy contemporary theatre and are prepared to pay a bit more, then the Basement show is probably the theatre company for you. And then Auckland Theatre Company, I'm generalising here, there's a lot more theatre companies than 3 in Auckland, but I'm just trying to show you the different layers and how they interact. So Auckland Theatre is very similar to the Court Theatre in Christchurch. It presents work in their theatre, ASB Waterfront Theatre, which is in Wynyard Quarter. It's a 675 seat theatre, and their tickets are expensive. They're generally priced around $50 to $90, so they are at the higher end of the market. And the audience who attend these shows generally come from an older demographic, not always, but generally. They like comfortable chairs, and a beautiful theatre with great sound. There's a lot of Auckland Theatre Company audience members who, you know, wear hearing aids or have difficulty with sound, so that's really important to them in their whole theatre experience, and they prioritise that above other things. They expect their theatre experience to be top-notch every time, and they'll tell you if they're unhappy. And some ATC audiences can be pretty conservative. So, you know, they might write a letter if you have, you know, a swear word in the show or a bit of nudity. It's a pretty fine line, and they're very clear about what they like. But, and some ATC audiences prepared to push the boat out a bit more, others are a lot more conservative. So, but generally, an ATC audience is after a show with high production values. So the best of Aotearoa's acting community, a night of luxury and socialising, and because they're paying a bit more, they always expect those high production values. You can't really take as many risks with a company like that pitching at that audience. So I guess what I'm trying to illustrate is that it's really important to match the audience to the offering, and just to understand that one size doesn't fit all. Some audiences who are full-on theatre lovers might go to shows from all those 3 companies, from Basement, Silo and Auckland Theatre Company, and some will just stick with one brand, the one that they feel that they align best to or meets their theatre experience needs. But if Auckland Theatre Company, for example, started offering only edgy contemporary theatre with up-and-coming artists, then that would throw that ecosystem that they've created in Auckland out of balance a bit. It would start competing with Silo and Basement quite heavily, and so audiences may drop across the 3 of them. And also for a section of that Auckland Theatre Company audience, there may no longer be a theatre that offers anything that's right for them, or it's a fit for them, so they may fall out of the arts market altogether. And to drill down into yet another layer, apart from, you know, the different theatre brands, what's really important to remember is even if you have one audience that is loyal to one brand, for example, one theatre company, then you've got to remember that it's not just one homogenous mass. Within that theatre audience, there's a whole lot of different types of people. So it's quite complex. Just briefly, I might show you. Here are some, when I was at Auckland Theatre Company, I created a number of pen portraits just detailing different audience types, if you like, and here's 10, I think, of them. We had more than that, but very briefly, just showing you how different they are and how differently you need to pitch them in terms of programming as well as marketing to get them along to a show. Champagne Socialists were sort of younger, more political, often male. Corporate Girlfriends, you tell by the picture, is big crowds of colleagues, often women, out to have a good time. They liked something that was just entertaining, a good night out. Socialising was very important to them. So the whole a girls' night out offer or package could be quite attractive. And then skipping to Little Old Lady Sisters, they're a really core part of the Auckland Theatre Company audience. They tend to be 70 and over. They often could be right-wing and more conservative, but they've still got the luxury dollar to spend. They're looking for a comfortable theatre experience. New York wannabe hipsters, they're sort of more of the basement crowd. Price point is quite important to them. And normally they probably wouldn't attend an ATC show, but they would be interested in the more edgy contemporary ones. And then, yeah, Parnell Ladies Who Lunch, I won't go into all of them, but Parnell Ladies Who Lunch, they don't have to come from Parnell, but these are stereotypes and generalizations so that you can understand your audience better and try and pitch them and bring them in and connect them with the right show for them. Parnell Ladies Who Lunch often like to go to the theatre to have something to talk about at their dinner parties. They like to invite their friends along to join them, and they won't tend to take any risks. They tend to be about sort of mid 40s to 60, quite the wealthy end of the market. So yeah, by creating all these different audience types, you can figure out how you can attract and bring your communities together. But anyway, I rest a little bit there from what I was trying to say. I was just trying to point out that having multiple theatre companies or art galleries or installations or craft making workshops or concerts or innovative tech companies, whatever it may be, is having a combination, and the most diverse combination, both in the creativity type as well as the layers within those audiences that go to those, is how you create those self-sustaining, diverse ecosystems. And many people think that if there's too much competition, then it will adversely affect the other. But generally the opposite happens. And I've seen that in action in Tamaki Makaurau since I came back from London in 2006. And the Auckland theatre scene has really flourished and gone from strength to strength. And that seems to be because it's got those layers in there, interconnecting audiences, it's got entry points, it's got if you change or grow into different ideas or have different needs and wants, then you've got those stepping stones. So I think it's amazing how that has flourished. Not during COVID, obviously. That's been a pretty tough time, and you're right, Ali. It's been been a rough ride. I mean, everyone's had a rough ride in COVID, but the arts have had a really tough time. But generally, by having something available for all tastes and the ability to leap from one to another, really helps create that self-sustaining arts community. So from studying audiences in my various different roles, I've observed how people are quite different in their consumption of art. And as I've mentioned already, they're not just one homogenous mass. One person's meat can be another person's poison. And we've all got a diverse range of wants and needs that nurture us, whether it's physically, socially, spiritually, or emotionally. And that's why it's important to have that diverse creative offering if we want to create an inclusive, creative community. And I believe that we've got a duty to offer the widest range possible, so that there's something for everyone. And in that way, we will nurture and maintain that rich creative tapestry in our regions. So by building these creative ecosystems in our communities, we also nurture sustainable career pathways, which is a really big issue in our sector. And I don't just mean for artists, but I also mean for audiences and arts administrators. if there's numerous arts organisations in a region, then an arts administrator has got somewhere to step from one to the other. But if there's only one, then there's only one place to go after that job ends or it's come to the end of its life for you, and that's out. And that's a real shame. So I do think it's really important for sustainable career pathways, developing that network, that ecosystem. So I did say that I would talk about the economic impact of the arts. So I'll touch on that before I finish up. And as I've mentioned, I work for WOW, WOW, World Wearable Arts, and the World Wearable Arts Award show in Wellington each year is a fantastic example of the economic impact events in the arts can have. We bring in 60,000 people to Wellington each year, and we generate $28 million worth of economic benefit to the city. It's been hugely useful to have that economic impact report, which has really made people sit up and take notice and support us, and I do realise how lucky we are. So WOW creates a real buzz in the city as thousands of people flock there every year for the 3-week season. So local retail, travel, hotels and accommodation providers, they all see huge increased sales when WOW comes to town. We also employ about 300 to 400 local production cast and crew and invest in local business when contracting, lighting, staging, storage, catering. And we partner with dance and hair schools, so providing a learning platform of opportunity and growing knowledge in the sector with internships. So it's a pretty exciting creature. WOW, and I'm also very interested because it attracts such a broad audience. I think it's a real entry point and stepping stone in terms of performing arts, and also just such a melting pot of so many different, of art, of music or newly composed music, lighting, dancing, aerialists, and these beautiful wearable art creations. It's quite an interesting melting pot that turns into a spectacular. So it's a pretty exciting company to work for, but it's hard to miss the economic benefit when you're talking about something on the scale of WOW. But what's important to note is I think that you have that economic benefit with the arts. No matter what scale you're on, it might have a smaller benefit, but it definitely still has benefit. Another example I can give you is when I was working at the Auckland Theatre Company, I was lucky enough to be on the project team when we opened ASB Waterfront Theatre in 2016. And we kept in close contact with businesses, particularly restaurants, just working together for mutual gain in terms of cross-promotion and things like that. And they were so excited when we opened because they said, oh my goodness, we've finally got midweek custom. So for all the restaurants around, that gave them a real boost, and obviously would have in the weekend as well. It can be very hard unless you've got an economic impact report to prove that. But I think that no matter how big or small the event or the offering, the creative sector is providing a real economic benefit, and not just economic, social, cultural benefit as well. It just can be a little bit harder to prove and articulate, and that's tricky when it comes to sponsorship and funding and that kind of thing. I thought I'd also mention, I'm not sure if you have heard of someone called Richard Florida, but he was an urban regeneration strategist. And 15 years ago, he wrote a book called The Rise of the Creative Class. And what he preaches in that best-selling book, and I will read from it, is that the clustering force of young creatives and tech workers in metropolitan areas was leading to greater economic prosperity. He said, don't waste money on stadiums and concert halls or luring big companies with tax breaks. He told the world's mayors, instead make your town a place where hipsters want to be, with a vibrant arts and music scene and a lively cafe culture. Embrace the 3 T's of technology, talent and tolerance. and the creative class will come flocking. So, and that's about, you know, building all of those creatives living and working and you know, have all those offerings in a city. And that strategy and philosophy was so successful with its urban regeneration that it then created a fallout 15 years on. Richard's now being accused of the gentrification of cities. So, you know, but it was because that strategy had been so successful that it had displaced those very people that, you know, had made it so successful and had come in. So, you know, I think that's interesting. And Richard Florida says himself that, it, you know, it's not just about creative and innovative growth in clusters, but the inclusion was part of prosperity. So I think that that's a really key takeaway and something that's really important to keep top of mind. And that's what I mean in terms about inclusion of communities as well, that we, you know, we consider providing all of those layers so that we're accessible to people from all walks of life, from all ethnicities, rich, poor, young, old, conservative, traditional, so that, you know, so we can enable a successful, self-sustaining, creative ecosystem in our community. And I think we need to exercise generosity of spirit, inclusivity, and empathy, and that, you know, it's a good way we can achieve that. Anyway, I think that's probably enough from me, is it? I will stop sharing. And I have spoken very quickly, so I'm very happy to repeat anything if something didn't make sense.
Thank you. No, that was really good. I'm glad that I'm not the only person that quotes Richard Florida all over the place. I make everybody buy the book, and have had some discussions with a number of councillors on the importance of actually that whole approach, appreciating, as you say, that in recent years it's become an issue because actually places have become so sought after. So no, thank you. I think that's it's really nice that someone else reads the same books that I read.
Oh, that's good. I'm glad I'm on the right track. Yeah, it doesn't surprise me. You know who he is.
No, he's a bit of a, I mean, he's a bit of an ego as well, I would say, but yeah.
Yes, yeah. Sure.
But that's a good thing, I think, in this instance. I had quite a few questions, and there may be some others coming through, but I'm actually going to start with a really basic question, which is not strategic or anything at all, but it's just out of real interest. When you talked about the basement, the silo, and ATC having different dollar values, how much typically do people pay for tickets when they go to the theatres in those particular companies?
So like basement can start, I mean, they probably have things around 15, but it's generally around 20, 25.
Yeah.
And I haven't been to a silo show for a while, but it's probably around 30, 40. And Auckland Theatre Company is 52. I know their musical this year, I think it's around 90. Yeah, getting up around 1999 for a top end musical. So yeah, and then I mean you've got people outside of that. When you go to musicals at the Civic, you'll be paying a lot more, but that's sort of general parameter.
I think that's really useful because one of the things we hear often is a barrier for people to access performance is actually the cost of the tickets and how we deal with that. And there's been a lot of discussion recently about pay what you can and how we can bring that into an arts, a performing arts environment. So that's something that sort of has come up a few times in the course of these conversations. So it's just good to get a handle on what's actually being charged in Auckland. And I think, you know, we assume that everything's going to be a bit more expensive up there, but actually those prices are not too out of kilter really, unless you get, you know, something massively international coming through.
And they do have schemes like Auckland Theatre Company, and a lot of companies have like a 30 under 30 scheme. You're probably familiar with those. To have those accessible price points. So price is definitely one factor, but I've often found that programming tends to be the biggest. You have to have something that actually appeals to you and is accessible in that way in the first place.
Yeah. Natasha, I thought that was fantastic. Thank you. Took lots of notes throughout the presentation. I'm just wondering to pick up on the thread that you sort of finished up on, which is this whole the concern off the back of the rise of the creative class around gentrification. That's kind of quite relevant to the conversation we're having, because in between art strategies, Nelson's gone from being both a desirable and relatively affordable place to being really unaffordable for lots of people. And lots of the conversations we've been having out in the community is thinking about exactly that, you know, is part of the reason that Nelson's had such a successful history in the arts, partly because people could afford to live here, and it gave them the space to create in that way. In terms of the framing that we're bringing to it, is thinking about, so how do we, with that in mind, and if within the context of this art strategy, there's not a huge appetite in the communities to draw lots of talent in necessarily, or that will be part of it for certain parts. What's your advice on helping in the context of what you're talking about, helping a region grow from within? What do you think needs to be done here locally to nurture talent and opportunities for the people who are here?
Well, I think as it's important to lay down foundations that have longevity as well, instead of having something that works for 5 years and then we all disappear and extract, and then the people with lots of money take over. I mean, I don't have all the answers, but maybe you have initiatives where there are cheaper leasing options for creative artists, and those are long-term leases, so they can't be pushed out. And maybe, it is considered in terms of price point, accessibility in terms of consuming art, that you always make sure that you have something that's accessible on that level. And, just with like the example of Auckland Theatre Company, you can have different price point accessibility points. So, and encouraging and offering spaces to all our young talent. I loved, I don't know Nelson well enough, so I'm sure there is a hub, like a tech hub, that you can invite. There's something similar where you work, Ali. Is that like an old biz dojo from Auckland, where you can come in? I'm not sure, but
it's similar, but not quite a tech hub. But it's we do have the AI Institute here, so it's similar.
Yeah, like having those spaces where you can just come in and plug in, and you can get a really cheap cup of coffee, and you can vibe off each other, and continuing to offer those opportunities in those spaces.
Yeah, it's interesting. Somebody we've spoken to in the course of this has talked about the fact that when they came to Nelson originally, they couldn't find their people. And because there isn't an obvious place to go for the arts sector and the arts community to find that space where you just connect immediately with like-minded people. And it's interesting, you talked about inclusion as well. I mean, that's something that is vitally important, I think, in terms of the context of what we're doing, but it's actually finding those places so people feel included. That's something that definitely has come up. I did have a question about black box theatres, because you mentioned that in the context of the basement. And again, that's something that over the years, the idea of having a black box theatre that can be multi-use and is just literally that structure that people move into. Do you think, in terms of that layering, is that a piece of infrastructure that's actually essential or useful? Where would you place that in the scheme of things?
I personally think it's really useful to have that, like Studio B or Black Box, because that is your entry point, and it doesn't mean that it's just for young people either. It's a starting point where you can experiment with new work in a slightly safer space, and in a space that is small and intimate enough to really launch that idea. Because you can, if you do something like that on a big stage or the wrong stage, it can kill it right out. But those quite, I don't know, grungy, organic, flexible spaces, I think, are really useful.
And just in your experience, did you see that when you were talking about sustainable careers, because as you said that, I'd literally just written that down as a note to myself about sustainable career pathways. And did you see much of a transition or a staircasing with individuals actually going through those companies? Was that something that you observed as you were sort of in that world?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there needs to be more. It's still a really big issue there. But in my time working for Auckland Theatre Company, they had a youth program. That was a fantastic youth program, and also a creative learning program that went through schools. So they'd be laying depth charges in primary schools with a myth makers program and things like that, and then at teenage level there'd be school holiday programs and things. And that school holiday program, most of the time, was the performances put on at the basement. So AGC would be linking those people in, and then introducing them to a space that would be quite nurturing for them and would be a good space for them. And we've seen a lot of people come up through that program who went to basement. They may or may not have gone to Silo. They might have done touring theatre. They might have gone, I mean, there's so many other theatre companies, but that have worked their way through. Yeah, absolutely. Quite a few people have done that.
And how important do you think formal training and education is as part of that? Because obviously programs run through schools or through, not through schools, through holiday programs or through the theatre companies. But how important do you think it is for people to be able to access that more formal education locally as well?
I might be the wrong person to ask about that. You should get someone like Mark Hadlow on who's the local, and he could talk to you about that in terms of an actor's journey, because it is tricky. I mean, people come in from all sorts of different routes. Some people have formal training and it's a great platform, and they're really successful. Others might have done it from a child or got into a TV show and then went and looped back to acting. So I do think it is important to have those institutions. There are a lot more around now than there ever used to be. But again, it's just another stepping stone, right? It's just another connecting pathway. So the more you have, the more of those stepping stones, the better, really. But I think if you do have that, it is even more important to have a black box space so that you've got somewhere to move. I know in Nelson there are a lot of amateur theatre companies, for example, but it's very hard to find paid work in that profession. So it's just about layering and, a little bit of everything.
And just in terms of the audience, so for the Auckland Theatre Company, was your audience very, did you have a lot of churn, or did you see a very sort of specific group of people that basically were your key audience and then bits and people dropping off at the end sort of thing?
Auckland Theatre Company is a subscription-based theatre company. They have been for quite a long time. So you've got a solid core. It ranges between, depending on the show, between 40 and 60% of that audience will be a subscriber audience. And it does, as I say, depend on the programming on the show. But what that does allow you to do, it gives you some stability. But then you'll have, a whole lot of people ranging through, and they'll dip in depending on the show, rather than sign up for 3 or 7 as a subscriber. And you do see people moving around. You'll see people that go to basement and Silo a lot. You'll also see people that go to basement and Auckland Theatre Company, those hardened sort of theatre consumers. And you see regulars, but you do see a range of people coming through. As I said, it's a lot about the programming. When I was at ASB Waterfront Theatre, we programmed Te Manawa, which Hawaii 2 brought in, because ASB Waterfront Theatre was a venue for hire, and that was just so wonderful to see this amazing new audience come in. Huge percentage of Māori and Pacific Island that ASB Waterfront Theatre doesn't normally attract. And it just filled the whole building with life. And it was very interesting because very different way of selling and attracting that audience. There's a lot of phone sales. There weren't online bookings. It was last minute, in the door bookings, heaps of prams. Just a very understanding your audience to get them in. That was really interesting. But a lot of it comes down to programming. You program wisely, you can attract all those different layers of audiences.
And what's the ratio between being a venue for hire and putting on your own performances? Is that something that's worked out scientifically, or is it something that just organically happens?
At ASB Waterfront Theatre?
Yeah.
So they, about 24 weeks of the year, they used to have theatre at ASB Waterfront Theatre. I think it might have increased with the recent programming. And it's really for ATC, it's about having a home first and foremost. They don't have to, there's a lot of rules and regulations when it comes to venues. So that allows them, you know, a lot of freedom to put on those shows and put them on when they want to put them on, and then everything else really has to be scheduled in and around that. So they do have a long-running relationship with the film festival, for example. I think that, yeah, it's quite a long-running relationship, and yeah, often the ballet have been there and the opera. But yeah, it's a venue for hire, so that's sort of first in, first served in and around the Auckland Theatre Company shows. And it's about money as well. It's a big expensive building to look after, so they do have commercial MICE, which is, you know, all the meetings and things during the day and the other spaces.
In terms of, I'm just thinking about your you know, the information there crossing between Wellington and the impact of something like WOW as a you know, signature event in the calendar in Wellington, and also then the layering that you've talked about in your experience with Auckland. What's your advice? You've touched on it, but what would your advice be in developing this strategy in terms of thinking about scale for Nelson? Like, Nelson's got quite a successful history of exports and, you know, really good arts products, but in terms of what would be possible for a city, you know, a fourth of the size of Wellington, what sort of scale of ambition do you think is possible here, and what would you like to see emerge over the next 10 years in this space? What do you think the potential is?
Well, I have to admit that I haven't seen much of Nelson because of COVID and the arts and what's going on. But of course, the arts, Nelson Arts Festival is very famous. In fact, I think I performed it when I was 8. My dad's storytelling company. But I mean, in terms of scale, I guess it depends what the city is trying to do. If we're trying to activate our local communities, or if we're trying to bring in, you know, socially and culturally, or if we're trying to bring in economic dollar, you know, which is the WOW of Wellington. That's all about, well, it's not all about the money, but it's a lot about the money. I guess it's looking at our region, and because there's so much already in Nelson, right? It's about how can we leverage and activate that. And WOW itself is still based in Nelson. I know, and particularly people listening to this, I know from talking to people that, you know, there's still a lot of hurt there that moved to Wellington. And that was all about commercial reality, and that grew too big for venues that were here. So you know, that's something that could be considered, as do we have the right spaces here to house what we need, and if we don't, is the long-term plan to look at that. I don't want to open any old wounds here, but I'm pretty sure at the time, well, I wasn't here, that WOW did go to the council and say, you know, we really want to keep this here, but it was growing too big. Is there anything you can do? And I don't, yeah, obviously there wasn't at the time because it moved to Wellington. But I mean, if we're trying to grow as a city and attract, retain cultural richness and tapestries, that's something maybe we need to look at. And if in our 10, 20-year plan, it's not a big event like WOW, what else is it? And what size space or venue or art gallery do we need to build or grow that into? And yeah, as I say, I mean, there's a lot already here. I think it's perhaps also about connecting the pathways and making sure that everyone knows about them. I'm pretty new here, but in terms of just a place that people go, I know there's the Nelson app, but, you know, finding where to go to find out about all the cultural things on offer. Maybe it's, yeah, it's just gradually layering in. I mean, I love the Phantom bollards, and that they, when I was a student in Christchurch, that was always the place I'd go to find out about what was going on. And I was quite excited in Auckland that I managed to get one put into Wynyard Quarter, and you know, and they can now light up and stuff. So yeah, it's just, yeah, I think I might be digressing from what your question was, Johny, but just expanding on the opportunities we have, and with WOW, I mean, WOW is still based here, but you know, there are opportunities in terms of, you know, museum growth and finding other ways to perhaps draw on that and link to the community as the start of the WOW story. And there are lots of other arts companies and things that we could draw on those and bring us all together with a common purpose as well, I think.
Yeah, I think that, I mean, that's the one thing that Nelson can claim and nobody else can, is that this is where WOW actually came from. And interestingly, it was developed in exactly the same year as RockQuest. So RockQuest and WOW both started in the same year, both in Nelson. So I think there's something in there. I haven't quite worked out exactly the link yet, but I'm going to make one at some point. The question I was just thinking then around, you mentioned about how with the Wynyard Quarter Theatre, then the ability to connect in with local businesses and how then they could leverage what was happening. And it's interesting, another conversation we've had has been with some owners of a local restaurant and cocktail business in Nelson, and they talked about the immediacy of the benefit of the arts activity. As soon as something's happening in the street, they see it directly impacting positively on their business. And I'm just wondering, were there any intermediaries that helped you have that communication with the business sector, or was it you just going directly to talk to them? Were there other agencies acting on your behalf? Like, was ATEED involved? Were there other people who actually were there supporting the arts sector in that relationship with the commercial sector? Because I know it's not always an easy conversation, because you have to understand each other in the first instance. But was that something that happened through other people, or was that just a direct communication?
That's an interesting question. No, we had to do a lot of it ourselves, because I think particularly because the area was really new. We had, gosh, what was it called? The New Zealand Tourism Research Institute, who had done a whole research plan. So they were really useful, and that was around design thinking. So that gave us a stepping stone and somewhere to branch off from. But we did approach all the restaurants ourselves. We did approach Panuku, because Panuku were connecting people there as well, which was great. That was more about place making for them, and we wanted to activate the space in terms of connecting creativity and helping it flourish. So yeah, the restaurants we had direct communications with. We also, there was I mean, this is about transport, but it was the Wynyard Quarter Transport Management Association. I was on that board because that board was created to help manage the transport in and around the area, and Auckland Theatre Company had a permanent place on that board. But that was quite useful for connecting different businesses. You know, Fonterra was on that. There, you know, the Sanford's the fish building, which right behind some quite big integral players in the local community. So that was quite useful in a weird way, in that transport seems quite remote, but it's all about the conversation about how to make that a vibrant space, right? So I think that was quite useful. But there was always more that we could have done if there was someone that was championing those relationships. That definitely would have helped.
Yeah, that's interesting, isn't it? You're right. I mean, well, what's lovely about that is the fact that actually that a theatre is part of that wider economic ecosystem that sits in Wynyard Quarter. So there you are, sitting alongside some of our biggest fishing industries and those other, you know, huge dairy, and at the same time you've got a theatre. There's something quite lovely in that. So it's about actually being part of that conversation is important. And again, that's something that's come up through the course of the conversation, is having that external champion for the arts, because actually the people working in their particular businesses or organizations are focused on delivering what they're delivering, and having someone else that you can rely on to do that for you is something that's quite has become quite a focus. So it's just interesting to know, were ATEED involved at all in anything that you did? Did they support you?
Yeah, absolutely. I went to ATEED because I was trying to champion this whole creative class thing with ATEED. So yeah, we did have conversations with them. And they helped support us when we were looking at trying to attract all the passengers on all the cruise liners as part of an offering. In fact, that's where Hawaii 2 came in, because we thought, you know, we could create a tourist offering there. So ATEED were quite good at that, and supportive. I do think there's a lot of ways we could have hooked in a lot more, but absolutely a vital relationship for sure.
And does Auckland Theatre Company get funding from the council?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And Creative New Zealand, and the council, and well, as ASB Bank and a number of players put in a lot of money towards 37 million that built that theatre as well.
Yeah, not insubstantial.
No, I think it's amazing. You can build a theatre for 37 million compared if you compare what other people do around the world. But there was a lot of generosity went there in there.
And did you feel that because one of the other things that we're not grappling with, but as part of our thinking, is that whatever we do through this strategy has to be elevated above political cycles. It just has to be understood that actually supporting the creative sector and the arts sector is just something that we do for the benefit of community, as we've talked about across all of its areas. Was that something that you felt was happening in Auckland? Is that it's just understood that this investment happens?
Yes.
Or did you have to work at it? Did you have to keep up with the advocacy, as I guess is what I'm thinking?
Look, I think you always have to keep up with the advocacy because of the, as I mentioned, like that economic impact report. Wellington really get it. I have never experienced such a relationship, with an arts organisation as, Wellington City Council and Wellington NZ. But they do have this wonderful economic report you can't argue with, whereas in other places it can be hard to prove that worth. Depending on who you're talking to, I think it's always a battle. It always feels like a battle often to prove the worth, the holistic worth of the arts. And that's why it's interesting when you mention champions, like arts champions. Like for me, I think that's the key. There's always an arts champion in an organisation, whether it's the council or a bank, or it's about connecting those people so that they can help champion it. But I think there has been wonderful support from, Auckland City Council was a major supporter of Auckland Theatre Company, and along with CNZ, and they do support the arts. But it's always a battle anywhere, I think.
It was really interesting as well, Natasha, how you mentioned and touched on for the right people to be here, you need to provide those second and third job opportunities, because actually that's kind of our whole talent attraction and retention challenge right across all industries at the moment, including creativity. What kind of, in terms of your experience and that sort of wider thinking about the creative sector as practitioners, but also everyone connected right throughout the value chain, what sort of support would you encourage or suggest we have as a city to nurture the relationships between creatives, but also to support young people? We know, from books like The Rise of the Creative Class and others that, to get for people to enter the creative sector is usually in their youth, and then people usually stick with it from there. And so what sort of opportunities would you encourage in that space for Nelson?
Well, I think internships, like the old apprenticeships, would be a great thing, and just lots of entry points. Internships, we are looking at them for WOW as well. You probably would know in the arts there's been a massive loss of talent over COVID, because people have had to go and earn a crust, and they might not come back to the industry, that particularly in production roles, riggers and specialists. So looking at, perhaps ways we can offer some training. So I do think across the board, no matter what you're talking about, internships are really good. I mean, basic trades, apprenticeships disappeared, and then there's a big hole of, people that you didn't have people with that skill set. So I think that's important. And again, going back to those spaces, whether it's a black box studio or whether it's low rent for an artistic endeavour, they are great places to help build that accessibility for young people.
Sorry.
I was going to say, it's quite impressive. I think you've managed to traverse our three focus areas very effortlessly throughout this. We're looking at the people, places, and potential of the arts. So you're just, you're just sort of effortlessly canvassing all of them in your answers. It's great.
Great.
I was just going to ask, obviously in terms of WOW, it has got this huge sort of energy that sits around it. And you mentioned it briefly, but how important do you think it is for a place to have those lighthouse events or those lighthouse initiatives that actually shine a light on the whole sector, that then enable it to have that depth? Do you think to have those very key prominent areas of focus is important, rather than having, I guess, just everything sitting at a similar level and just going along at a moderate tempo? Do you think to have those, you know, massive sugar hits, is that a good thing?
Yeah, well, everyone might have a different opinion, and it's an interesting question because, you know, you can have a rich tapestry with a whole lot of things that hum along that are a bit smaller, and but then I look at WOW and I think, you know, it's really incredible what that offers Wellington and all people in the arts that live in Wellington as well. Like, it, you know, it is a fantastic opportunity, and although I'm sure some locals get sick of it after the third week, you know, of these thousands of people, tourists in town, people really look forward to it in Wellington. Like, I've in these conversations I've had with people, you know, they really can't wait for it to come back. So that suggests to me that a big impact event like that can attract and create a huge amount of energy in a city is really, really beneficial. And I mean, I think, although I haven't been here for one, that Nelson Arts Festival, I presume that does that for Nelson, and it would be great if it did include and draw in everyone in the community as well, rather than, yeah. I think you can have both. I don't think you have to have a big event, but I think that will add, it will put your, you know, your name on the map, right, and get you more economic benefit.
And I guess it's that visibility for audiences as well. It's something that people, as you say, that don't typically go to the more edgy things will go to something that's actually easily consumed to give them that stepping stone into something else. It's interesting. I'm just thinking we've got Tomatatini on the horizon for Nelson, which is going to be an enormous, potentially on steroids sugar hit, you know, for this region in terms of just the size of that event, which is something that's never been seen here before. Johnny, you might remember the numbers of participation, but it's a huge number of people who participate and all of the supporting people that come along to that. So that's something that we've got to build towards, which is quite an exciting opportunity, but it's actually not that far away now.
It's not that far away, and if you, it's a brilliant time to be talking about that because it's 50 years of Te Matatini at the moment, and they're releasing every day currently. Up from last week, I think they are releasing a recording on Spotify or Māori, streaming on Māori television of a different waiata from each year. They're just brilliant. Looking back at 50 years of Te Matatini and the significance of that event. So that's huge, but also all the building events have been disrupted by COVID, but there's a huge runway to Te Matatini for a region. And so we've been able to host secondary school and primary school competitions and so on. So pretty exciting. We're just coming towards the end of our time, and I'd like to give you the opportunity just for any closing thoughts in a minute, Natasha, just to wrap up this Wananga. But I just wanted to do a bit of a check-in with everyone who's on the call and participating in the arts and creativity process. And it's been a couple of weeks since we touched base, so I just wanted to provide some reminders about different ways that you can engage with us through this process. So thank you to all of you who are tuning in. You're also at any stage during the week, we have our physical headquarters for the strategy as well. So this is our Create Nelson HQ, which is a little corner that we've taken over at the Nelson I site. It's open from 10 a.m. till 4 p.m. Every weekday. And if you head in there, there's some reading materials, some pens and paper, and an opportunity to take some time out and write your contribution or submission to the development of the arts and creative strategy. So really, really encourage you, if you'd like to, if you're sick of Zoom or you're sick of sitting behind your screen because of COVID, we wanted to create a safe space for people to go get immersed in the art strategy and contribute their thoughts in that way. Of course, if it's easier for you, we have a number of digital tools available as well. So you're welcome to start and generate conversations through our Facebook group. And there is a button for talking to us through the website as well. So createnelson.nz. And I think we've had over 40 people already leave their submissions there just in the last few weeks to make those contributions. So that's been really, really valuable already. We will keep having these virtual Wananga. We'll continue to develop them. We'll be talking to more local guests, more guests from outside the region to see what we can learn from others. And you're welcome to engage in those and send in your questions. once we get into May, we'll start holding community hui through Zoom as well. And that'll be an opportunity for us to test the objectives and priorities that are coming through as part of the strategy and have a korero with you about that. And of course, many of you will now be aware that we're running regular walks of art, and they kick off at 7:30 a.m. on a Monday morning, but we're having a bit of a break from those at the moment just because of the public holiday. So we'll be back at the beginning of May with those art walks again, and they'll be advertised on the Facebook page. And then lastly, I just wanted to weave in, I guess, a couple of the community. We've been out talking to so many people, and Ali and I are very aware that aside from these virtual Wananga, those conversations are largely happening in a vacuum. But I wanted to share just two contributions this evening from people that we've talked to over the last few weeks and their views on the art strategy to help provoke some thinking and engage people further. So the first one is from Johnny Hendrickson, who you will know as the founder and CEO of Shutterrock, a really successful global technology company. And this is reading directly from in Johnny's words. He said, "Creativity is one of the most important economic forces for us to consider. In an age of rapid automation, creativity will be our most valued skill set moving forward. The creative economy is the space we operate in at Shutterrock, and it's through those global opportunities that we're able to put our roots down here in Nelson to grow a global company. Investing in and purposefully supporting the arts and creativity is such an important decision for a city to make. By putting the arts first, you are making a statement and showing that you care in a way that will unlock other investment and growth opportunities. It's not just an economic gain either. The arts support our well-being in so many ways. We need to embrace that and back it wholeheartedly." So many of the themes that we've been
I think you must have read Richard Florida.
Sure. And then the last one, or the next one I want to read out is from Monique Richards, who's a co-founder of Supernatural, one of our awesome creative and digital agencies here in Nelson. And Monique is from Australia. She grew up in Australia, but spent the last 10 years in Europe working in agencies, and now is based here. And she said the difference between the expected and the extraordinary is creativity. It's the moments of wonder, of awe, of being propelled to look at something from a fresh perspective. It sits deep within all of us, but we often put it aside to push forward with the musts, the have-tos, and the important things. Creativity is the starting point and the end point of everything we do at Supernatural. It underpins all of our decisions, our relationships, and our output. We live to create and to move people through our creations. As a region, we have the raw ingredients of world-class potential, but we have to overcome our complacency and fear of failure to unlock that opportunity. Let's not manage creativity, let's unleash it. I just wanted to share those because we're having such exciting conversations out and about, and it's really important that we're able to reflect some of those back to you as well. And of course, we'll start to release material over the coming month and once we're underway with the development of the strategy. But that's the flavour of some of the voices that are coming through in the conversations that we're having in addition to these virtual Wananga. So I just wanted to share those. But Natasha, I'll hand it back to you for the final word, and then we can close.
Oh, thanks, Johnny. I just want to say again, thank you very much for the opportunity. I'm really excited once COVID gradually disappears to get out and about and see what's happening and see that everything flourish in Nelson. And all I can say is, if we can be generous and inclusive, it's amazing what we can all achieve together. So looking forward to it. And what beautiful words that you just spoke there as well. Thank you, Ali, and thank you, Johnny. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And I do have to say one last thing, Johnny. Sorry, I couldn't let it go. Just the artwork behind me. I just wanted to remind people, because this is actually, I'm sitting in the office of the Mahi Tahi Collab, and this is actually work by Kerry Aitken, who's one of our participants on the artwork program, which is actually an MSD funded program, which is piloted. There are 4 pilots in New Zealand. One of them is here in Nelson, Tasman. And we've got an exhibition of Kerry's work here at the Collab at the moment, and there'll be an opening tomorrow night. So I think it's just really, it's transformed the place in a way that actually nobody working here could have envisaged. It's been so nice, and people are really enjoying the space now. So I just wanted to point out and acknowledge the artist is Kerry Aitken. Thank you.
Yeah, awesome. Great point. it's made a huge difference to that space. It's so cool to see. Look, I will close us with a karakia, and just want to thank you very much, Natasha, for your generosity, your willingness to give up your time, share your knowledge and experience with us. It's hugely valuable. We're thrilled to have you in the region, but also thrilled to have you supporting this strategy kaupapa and sharing with us this evening. So thank you very much for that. I'll translate this karakia first, so you know what I'm about to say, and then I'll do the karakia, and then we'll wrap up the session. So in Reo Pākehā, let the strength and life force of our ancestors be with each and every one of us, freeing our path from obstruction so that our words, spiritual power, love and language are upheld, permanently fixed, established and understood, forward together. So, he karakia tātou. Kia tau ngā manaakitanga te me ngaro, ki runga ki tēnā o tātou. Kia māhia te hua mā ki hiki, kia toi te kupu, toi te mana, toi te aroha, toi te reo Māori, kia tūturu, kia whakamaua, kia tīna, hui e tai.
Thank you. Kia ora.
Tātou, thank you everyone. Kia ora.